Thank you very much. It's an honour to be here. To describe my primary role, or what I work on most of the time, is I go into organisations and champion managers and leaders and workers to work their way through the mush of workplace conflict, also community and family conflict, and to try and, if you like, find more choice in the circumstances that they find themselves in. Now, the conflict often escalates into a dispute. So conflict is, my interpretation, is what goes on internally for the person. The dispute is when we engage with someone else. Often workplace conflict, when we are unhappy in the workplace, we then take home and then create a dispute. So a lot of the dispute in the workplace can be created through what is a process conversation. We've heard from two lovely speakers here today about like the performance management process. Is the job or the role you're in actually matching the job description that you're employed for? Have your organisation recently undergone a machinery of government change and other things like that that have built from conflict into dispute into the workplace? It's interesting, there's been some patterns that have shown up over the last 25 years of working in this space, and today I'd like to share with you those patterns and what do I do when I'm brought in, just to share you some of the tools I use. And to invite you to learn them if you would like. So the first pattern is, it's interesting that management of people hasn't evolved as quickly as the technology in the workplace. When I joined the Navy in the mid-80s, I didn't have a computer on the desk. And now everybody has a computer and access to Twitter and other forms of connection, yet the management of people and the people they work for hasn't evolved as strongly in the connection space as they have in the technology on their desk. So that would be the first pattern. Workers, so 100 years ago when we worked in the workplace, most workers were employed for their physical labour. So they were blacksmithing or ploughing or building. And a manager in those contexts worked with the skills of doing the task. How good are they at blacksmithing? So they could actually get them to do a task. Then in the middle of the last century, a lot of the workplace shifted to processes where the physical activity was reduced and there was more factory-like employment brought in, where the intellectual capacity or value of a worker wasn't celebrated so much as their ability to follow directions and orders and plans in a timely and efficient fashion. In recent decades, most of those processes, if they haven't been computerised, have been sent to another country where it's cheaper to do. And so the majority, or something like 50% of the workers in the workplace nowadays, but especially in Canberra, are considered to be knowledge workers. And if you're in middle management or moving up to senior management, almost every one of you is a knowledge worker. So the higher we get, as we heard this morning, the higher we get in organisations, the less relevant your professional expertise becomes. The more you're paid to manage thinking, manage knowledge, and manage a workforce that is now more educated and has different expectations. So the pattern for me has been that managers haven't necessarily evolved with the staff or the employees that they have. So, and also then we move to another pattern. So there's a new generation in management. So younger generations than me are now in management places, and their expectations in the workplace has changed. The newer generations, and I wrote down some of the feedback that I get as I have conversations, have different expectations and needs than their predecessors. They expect more from the organisation. They want to develop personally. So it's about the individual development. They value freedom and independence. They enjoy diversity and change. When I certainly started my career in the military in the mid-80s, people were there for 30-odd years, whereas now you do 4 years and start a new career. So the people in management now are evolving. And these people need a different type of leader. So if you are managing a younger and new generation of junior managers in your organisation, they need you to be a different leader. They need a leader who can enable their intellectual success, improve their thinking, and actually build their individual capacity to contribute to the organisation and beyond. So it's time for us to give up second guessing what others need in the workplace and become masters of thinking, and we've heard about that a lot today, and become masters of helping others to think differently and think for themselves. The other pattern I often find in the workplace is when I'm in a dispute, the ability to think appreciatively is essentially diminished. So what I mean by that, appreciative thinking comes from the process of appreciative inquiry, which some of you may be very familiar with. And it's based very similar to the talk we heard earlier today, is putting energy into what we want more of. So with the problem-solving thinking, we can identify what's going wrong very quickly. And most people, when I sit down in the workplace, can tell me what's not working. When I ask the question, so how would it be if it was successful? What would you like to see more of? If it was to feel differently, how would it feel? They can't fill that space. So what can we do as leaders is to define what is it we want to put energy into, what do we want more in the workplace. The second step, we can coach people to recognise and accept their own experience. I don't know if this happens in your workplaces or in your families, but you hear conversations where you say, you make me mad. You disappoint me. You're not holding up your end of the bargain, where we hold other people responsible for our experience. And then I have the other side of it where I say to people, who am I if it's not my job to keep everybody happy in the workplace? Man, that's a big ask. To be in a workplace solely to try and keep everybody else happy. What we can do as leaders is to leave people responsible for their own experience. Coach people to identify new habits and ways of thinking. So how do we change thinking? We don't want to change what people are thinking, we want to change how they think. Their process of thinking. We want to build the creativity in that thinking. And we've heard 2 speeches previously today who have said the same. And when they come with new ways of thinking, support those insights and learning. So often it's not the outcome of the new thinking that's important, it's the process of how they've got to that outcome we want to support. Because as we talked, it's the context that changes the colour. So if we can get the process of thinking, then the context, whatever context we apply that thinking in, can build new colour. So that's what we can do. So what stops us from doing that? There's 3 points that stop us. We do create our own experience. And over the years, I've learnt that many people, as I said, hold others responsible for their own experience. So building awareness that we are each responsible for ourselves and how we show up. The second part is we are sense-making beings. In the absence of information, we will make stuff up. And the media is really good at getting us to do that. You can plant questions and we will make up the gaps of the information. We are sense-making beings, and our need is to make sense of what's going on in the workplace. So if we see something that has a physical or an emotional impact on us, we will make up intent. And our makeup says that we will generally attribute a negative intent to something that we don't understand. So we are sense-making beings. We make stories up. The last one is we are anxiety avoiding. If I had $1 for every time I've heard someone say, well, I didn't want to tell them because I knew they'd get upset. I didn't want to take my plate of food back because I knew that the chef would get upset. Or I didn't want to give them feedback about their performance and being late to work because I didn't want to get them upset. We naturally avoid conflict. If we can accept that and then manage ourselves in that, we are anxiety avoiding. Being a negotiator in defence and doing conflict for a living doesn't mean I enjoy it either. What enables me to do, and to sit in the fire, if you like, in some interesting conversations, is I have a robust process that I trust, that grounds me. And I want to share that process with you. Hang on, before we go there, I'm going to give you a task. A quick task. So you may have seen this before. It is a basketball game. If you have seen this, can you please keep the answer to yourself? So I'm going to show you, it's no more than 30 seconds, a basketball game. Your job is to count the number of passes between the white shirted players. Okay, so if I'm wearing a white shirt and you, I might throw it to you directly. I might bounce it off you to the next person, as long as the ball goes from me wearing a white shirt to the next person who's wearing a white shirt. Okay, so counting the number, and we've got 300 odd people here. We're all very intelligent. We're here and we're on the mark. Let's see if we can all get within whatever the norm distribution is. So please keep the answer to yourself. Okay. Anybody get 15? Any ads on 15? There's a 1 or 2. 16? How many people got 16? Yep. About a thing. 17? Yep. What about 18? Oh, anybody get over 20? Sometimes I've had people say they got 60 or 70. Did anybody get around there? No. So we got a range here between 15 and 18, basically, or 20, around 20. Why did we get a range between 15 and 20? Too many balls going on, there was distractions. What else? Passes that were hidden. Why else? Yeah, there was a gorilla. Did anybody not see a gorilla? Anybody not see a gorilla? Okay. So those of you who didn't see the gorilla, what are you thinking about the people who did? Were they paying attention to the task? I reckon they didn't count the right number. If you saw a gorilla, you did not do the job. What about those who did see the gorilla? What are you now thinking about those who didn't? Well, man, I don't want to go driving with them. They might not see the car. Oh. So why do you think there were some people who didn't see the gorilla? Yeah. Can you recall how many times I asked you and demonstrated to you about the white-shirted players and passing? At least 3 or 4 times. So what I'm doing is creating an expectation or a filter within you. So I am influencing what you see by creating a filter in your mind. So imagine if you get an email or a text message that says, oh, Jack's coming to work for you. Jack doesn't work in an iron lung. Good luck with that. What are you going to be looking for? Or Therese has depression. You can't give her feedback. You can't give anybody with mental health feedback. Good luck with that. So you can have filters created which shift what you see, and we heard that about the context as to what you see. So being aware of what you are showing up in your experience that's going to influence your interactions in the workplace. Do you quickly want to see those who didn't see the gorilla to see if there is a gorilla? Have we got time? Not only is there a gorilla, he beats his chest. Okay. It's funny, I have been at presentations where I've had to play that 2 or 3 times, and when we did a big lawyer convention, they sat there at lunchtime and counted them. I believe it's 16 and a half, because the last one doesn't count as a pass. But we won't go there. So what puts people in conflict? Some of the patterns and some of the needs that people have that puts them in conflict. And I'd phrase them under values, needs, and identity. So values, the core principles that give us, or that guide us in so many ways. So the common words I hear are respect, trust, fairness. And so this is why I've put this complaint in. This is why I don't want to work here anymore. This is why I'm in a work cover process, because it wasn't fair. Then trying to find out what are the behaviours that demonstrate fairness for each of us in this room, or respect for each of us in this room. The next one is needs, those requirements which provide a sense of security, self-worth, optimism, satisfaction in the workplace. So and there's a number of people I imagine in here, but when I work with people who are on The Great Barrier Reef Project, or I work with people, and I'm privileged to work in Timor-Leste. The people are motivated to be there from passion. So what are their needs that gives them a sense of self-worth, because that's where they work? Especially, and emergency services, they're there for the community and to do what they can save. What do you provide as a leader? And the last one is identity. How do we view our status and role in the profession and personal lives? It's interesting when I ask people just today, so what do you, or tell me about you, and they go, I'm a doctor, or I'm a policeman, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm a whatever. So their identity is very closely tied up with their profession. So how do they let go of that when they move up the chain? Because as you heard earlier today, that a scientist, it's been since 1985 since he's practiced science. How do you enable or able to, if you like, let go of some of your identity or disassociate your identity from who you are as a person, your core values and needs, so that you can then manage your people or unleash your people? So now this is what I do. 100-0. This 100-0 concept I've borrowed, if you like, from John Izzo, and it's about we are 100% responsible with zero excuses for how we show up at the work, regardless of the context of how we get there. And what I mean, even if there's not many delays in traffic in Canberra, but if you're delayed in traffic and you're not going to be there in time, so do you show up less patient or more emotional, or do you show up as your best self? So we are 100% responsible with zero excuses for how we show up at work. My own experience this morning was my son's puppy, who's 15 weeks, chewed the heel off my shoe. And I'm about to stand in front of the room. And I thought, okay. So how do you show up and still be your best self? And the process is called self-differentiation, allowing how and how accepting responsibility can change everything. So what does being self-differentiated mean? It means I know my experience. I'm aware of where I am right now, what's going on for me. I'm able to share that and describe that to someone. This is my experience. I'm open I'm curious and openly seek to understand the experience of others. This is where the empathy comes in. So I'm not holding myself responsible for your experience. I want to understand it so I can accept it, but not necessarily agree with it. And I look for the positive intent in behaviours in others. I'm appreciative. I don't look and assume that they're out to get me, that this is about me. I look for what might have brought them to this point. And the last one is I understand the boundaries of my authority, can explain to others and how I will exercise it. And what that means is not only what authority is attributed to you by your role, but what will you accept or not accept as an individual? What do your values and beliefs say is okay and not okay, and how will you set that boundary? So the jewel in the crown, so there's a whole process to building differentiation and leadership skills in that, but the jewel in the crown for me is this little tool here called the Experience Cube. And I apply this in any context, and this is what keeps me safe when I'm in a threatening situation. And what I mean by that is it means I can stay separate yet connected to the people with whom I'm working with. So this is the work of Gervais Bush, and he basically says for every experience there's 4 elements. Observations, thoughts, feelings and wants. So observations are the data that you might have, what a video camera might pick up, what you can see and hear. It's without qualifiers or without judgments. It's the raw data and the objective criteria. From observations and very little data, we can form an interpretation, an assumption, a judgment, and a perception. Sometimes we're not even aware of the data and we've made a judgment. So the second element is thoughts. The third element is feelings, which is both emotional and the physiological impact. So when I'm coaching and working with somebody of a certain age and potentially, it's probably just a certain age, it's not necessarily male or female, if I was to say to them, how did that leave you feeling? They would not necessarily have a response. But if I was to say, how did that impact on you? They could then say to me, of not sleeping. My neck, I tell you, I haven't had this much indigestion in years. And then I can extend that to, so if you were to attribute an emotion to that, what might it be? And they go, well, anger, stress, disappointment, hurt. And they can then locate an emotion. And see, we heard earlier about our limbic system and the reptilian brain and the amygdala. If I can get somebody to label an emotion, even if it's not correct, that then basically eliminates the impact it's having. It stops being a negative impact, and they can then be more cognitive. It allows the person to engage in the conversation. And then the last element is wants, which is needs, goals, outcomes, targets, and success. The question I use here when I'm working with people is, so what will be successful? How will it feel different? Because if I say to somebody who's in conflict, what do you want? They can only identify the problem. I want it to stop. They can't identify what success is or what the solutions might be. So I need to build empathy in them of their own experience. So I ask them, what will success feel like? How will you be thinking differently? What perception, assumptions might change? So that they can be empathetic to themselves before they can actually devise something that is sustainable in the workplace to change behaviours. So that's the experience cube. What can bring us undone? A leader's mindset. And so essentially, quickly, a fixed mindset is somebody who believes you are born with skills and qualities that will lead to success. The person with a fixed mindset, you will hear, often needs to advertise or promote their accreditation and their skills and what they do for a living, where they've worked. Somebody who believes that some of us have it and some of us don't. And we can all be fixed mindsets in different aspects of our lives. A growth mindset is somebody who acknowledges that we are born with skills and basic, genetics plays a part. However, it's the amount of effort we put in that'll grow the skill or grow where we want to go. So a growth mindset is about understanding that if I was to focus on something I wanted to build, I'm likely to get it more than if I focus on the opposite, the problem solving. So underneath the growth mindset is the appreciative thinking. What do I want more of, and how can I ask for that? Early in my motherhood life, I remember sitting on the lounge, confession, with my 6-week-old baby watching Dr. Christopher Green on Oprah Winfrey. And he said if I could get mothers to do one thing, that would be to ask their children what they want them to do rather than tell them what they don't want. And he gave the example of a mother walking down the footpath with the children, and the amount of mums he hears say, "Don't run on the footpath." Whereas he said, if I could get the mother to say, "Walk on the footpath, run on the grass." And for me, I went, yeah, you know what? That makes so much more sense. And now my 19 and 17-year-olds do that back to me. Sometimes it works, it's handy. But for me, it took the pressure off as a mother, which is, if you were to ask me what do I do for a living, peace building one at a time with my children being at the forefront. It took the pressure off. I didn't have to tell them what they were doing wrong. I could ask them what I want them to do more of. That's the appreciative mindset. So I've got another quick exercise. I have no idea of the time. Sorry, I'm right? Okay. I have another quick exercise for you. What I'd like you to do, and please, you can share this at the table if you want to, but some of you might get it. You'll only have 10 seconds to do it. Your task is to add one line and make this a 6. One line and make it a 6. Hey. Yeah. So how many people assumed a line meant straight? Yeah. How many people went to Roman numerals? Yeah. So that is an example of how our mindset and filters that have been created can keep us in a fixed thinking. And that's why, as leaders, we need to unleash, we need to encourage people to think about how they think, not what they're thinking. Develop a process. So this is primarily what I do with the managers when I come into the workplace. I develop their skills as to be a leader, as a coach, to do my job essentially, so that they can then develop the skills in their staff to be responsible and accountable for their own experience in the workplace. And how they do that is, first of all, and this is about having the conversation, if we go back to what Jane talked about, and having the conversation in all sorts of contexts. So this is about determining what is success for this conversation, what will our goal be. Then asking curious questions to gain insight and reflection on a recent situation. To develop perspective, options and choices. To identify and develop skills, actions needed to manage the situation or to shift it, to change behaviours. To review risk and challenges and to confirm the next steps, and bottom line, make notes. I can smell something delicious. Being 100, 0 or self-differentiated. Knowing what my experience is and self-aware, can describe my experience and share it with others. Being openly curious about what others' experience might be. Don't assume negative. Look for positive intent. What might they be? What might my staff want to achieve? And have clear boundaries of what is okay and what's not okay. So in 25 years of working in this space, I can recall 3 people who show up to work to make it a disaster or a miserable place to be for everybody. In 25 years and thousands of coaching hours, 3 people. I assume when I walk into a workplace that everybody I meet wants to be their best self and do a good job. So I ask you and invite you to assume the same. So thank you. People don't need to be managed. They need to be unleashed.
Thanks. I really appreciate everything you had to say about self-awareness. I think that is the most important quality that we can all have. That statement you put, I understand the boundaries of my authority and can explain it to others and how I exercise it. That sort of doesn't really line up with what a lot of I experience in the APS in terms of like, yes, managing uncertainty is a skill, but creating uncertainty is also something that sometimes people use their authority to do. And it's often really unclear, like, who's going to do what for me. So I wonder if you can talk about that in the work context, if you know what I mean.
As to how you would establish those boundaries?
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, like how you establish from other people what it is they'll actually do for you, I mean.
So in that context where I go into a workplace, understanding my authority is often, and some of the statements I use is, if you accept a fortnightly wage from the public service, you are accepting the requirements under the Workplace Health and Safety Act and the Code of Conduct. So hence, you have some boundaries that have already been established for you by the fact that you accept a wage. So then I will actually say to the person who's sitting in front of me, what might you do more of to fit within those boundaries clearer? What could you be doing more of? And similarly, so I'll give you an example of yesterday. I had a manager, I was coaching a manager who's dealing with a staff member, and the pattern of behaviour that he does is when he goes out, he's got two women that sit beside each other, and he will say, "Good night, ladies," and he will say to one of the staff members, "Please don't work too late." So therefore, he is now answering a harassment complaint because he doesn't say that to the other one. Because he hasn't established what his boundaries are in the sense of how he is showing up as a manager in that conversation. So in that, what I would ask him to do is, what do you think the complainant needs to hear to know that you care as much about her experience in the workplace as you do about the one you're asking not to work too late? Rather than describing why he's dealing with them differently. Did that answer your question?
No, I was kind of wondering more how to deal with people who kind of avoid responsibility, but those above me rather than sort of. I can't really say to my boss or my boss's boss.
Managing up is the first thing I do. There's many a senior manager who doesn't want to deal with conflict. I actually no pointing fingers.
I don't see any senior managers.
what I do is go to risk, because I've got to get their ear first, got to get their attention first, and their need, their interest. So that it's got to be attractive to them, to what we heard about the East. It has to be attractive to them to listen before that. Then I can get them to establish boundaries. So I go to risk. So what's the risk to you if the minister asks this question? What's the risk to you if this is on the front of the Canberra Times? What's the risk to you if this goes to investigation? Then I can start to establish those boundaries. So I've got to sit in their shoes.
For a lot of people in the public service in the current times, there's a lot of experience of people using performance management systems to punish staff. I've noticed that in private sector organisations are actually doing away with performance management systems because they find it costs a lot of money, and sometimes it only encourages their best staff to leave. But do you have any sort of words of wisdom around that, or any insights that you can share?
So one of the things I didn't mention is one of the patterns I see is most of that performance management system is still based, and this is my opinion, in the 1950s process management. It's not based in meeting the needs of the the employee that you have in the workplace nowadays. So for me, there's a systemic issue often in the performance management. And I don't know how many people here, but I talk to a lot of people who have a 5-minute conversation at the 3-month and 6-month mark. And then it used to be in October whether you're getting your bonus at Christmas. But that's not. And that was the only performance management they had. So my job is to make it a cultural norm that you have the conversations. A lot of the research says that you should have 20 minutes with every staff member each month at least to understand their experience, to build the personas that you want, so you can write their story and meet their needs. So my personal opinion is the system is not in line with the workforce that we have now, more often than not.
That raises a question for me. So I meet with my staff at least half an hour every fortnight, so I'm exceeding that expectation. The question is, how do I get them to use that space for them rather than come to me with the business? Because it's not for business, and I keep telling them that. Don't I, Abby? Yes? I keep telling them that. This is not for the business, this is about you, this is about us, just, talking about your needs, etc., etc. How do you encourage them to do that? Because they come in with the pile of business, and that's what they want to talk about.
So for me, that comes back to that self-differentiation slide here, is understanding what each of your experiences is sitting there. So I would give you a list of questions to not allow Abby, to set the boundaries, to not allow Abby to get away with bringing the business into the conversation. But that's setting up the process in that conversation. So how would you create a map and the expectations in that conversation? The other question I'd like to ask, at the risk here of not being invited back next year, is do you have conversations about business outside that half hour?
Yes. But the standing rule with my people is create meetings for business, or catch me whenever you can. This is supposed to be about you.